Peru's Prosecutor Office opens preliminary investigations of high-level police commanders for arbitrary detentions in Lima. In France, tensions escalate as public workers strike against the government's pension reform continue. Main trade unions are calling for new mobilizations. And the death toll after the devastating earthquake that hit Turkey and Syria surpasses 17,000 as rescuers race to find survivors trapped under the rubble. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. And as always, I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. And now we begin with the news. Peruvian Prosecutors Office opened a 60-day preliminary investigation of high-ranking police officers for arbitrary detentions of students in Lima. The government office informed that the investigations against high commanders of the National Police of Peru will be led by the 4th Corporate Criminal Prosecutor's Office of Lima under the charge of abuse of authority. The prosecutor's office also indicated that the accused will be investigated for the death of the demonstrator Victor Santiesteban, who was hit in the head by a tear gas bomb. Meanwhile, the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights urged Dina Boluarte to be accountable for the police raid into the University of San Marcos after the denunciations of abuse of force against its students. And the Minister for Europe and French Foreign Minister Catherine Colonna said during a press conference in Brasilia that France and Brazil are looking to launch a new dynamic in their relations. Colonna's visit comes as both countries look to rebuild ties after a deterioration in relations during the presidency of the far-right Jair Bolsonaro.
I have come here to Brazil at the request of the President of the Republic so that our two countries can launch a new dynamic in their relations. For France, Brazil is a leading partner, the fruit of a historic friendship between our two countries. We hope that our meeting marks the beginning of a relaunch of this special political partnership that has linked us with Brazil for 15 years now, but which we are going to update, strengthen, and give a new ambition to.
In Ecuador, social and indigenous organizations demanded respect for the popular will expressed in the sectional elections and the referendum proposed by the last government. At a press conference, the Indigenous Peoples Federation of Ecuador rejected the recounting of the votes that has begun in 6 provinces. The federation also pointed out that the rejection of the referendum promoted by Guillermo Lasso was the result of the struggle of Ecuadorians on the streets and of those affected by neoliberal policies. The indigenous movement also rejected the call for dialogue made by the Ecuadorian president.
Secondly, about the call for national unity, we have been clear we are nobody's toy, nobody's mockery. We have been in dialogue for a year, twice at the tables directly with the president. And in those 8 days of mobilization, 9 brothers died because of the recklessness, because of the irresponsibility of the government. Even a military brother died while we were sitting at the dialogue table. We have spent 3 months in dialogue. Do you think we're going to return to a table to sit with the President of the Republic, who has lied 1,000 times?
Let's take a short break, but first, remember you can follow us on our TikTok account at TeleSUR English, in which you will be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and more. Other stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. On Wednesday, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky requested the UK Parliament once again for fighter jets to fight against Russia. During his first visit to the United Kingdom since the start of the armed conflict on February 2022, Zelensky made the request while addressing the British Parliament and proclaimed that Russia will lose the war. He also emphasized the importance of the artillery and air defense coalition to stop the Russian military offensive. In this context, with the slogan "Planes for Ukraine, Wings for Freedom," the president pointed out the need for the Western powers to provide fighters and additional support to defend themselves in the air.
Trust this symbol will help us for our next coalition of the planes, and I appeal to you and the world with simple and yet most important words: combat aircrafts for Ukraine, wings for freedom.
And the Russian President Vladimir Putin warned that about 4 million people in Afghanistan need urgent humanitarian assistance. President Putin stressed Moscow's concern over attempts by the countries of the region to use the situation in Afghanistan to expand and build infrastructure under the pretext of fighting terrorism. In this regard, the head of the state warned that the production of narcotics in the Asian country is growing in a worrying way, denouncing that about 80% of the opiates on a global scale are of Afghan origin. On the other hand, the Russian president said he was aware of Kabul's plans for large economic projects that could stabilize the country's economy. Now we move on to other topics. In France, tensions escalate in the midst of the public workers' strike against the government's pension reform. Meanwhile, the main trade unions are calling for new mobilizations. Several unions, among them the General Labor Confederation, as well as the transportation sector and the energy companies, decided to maintain the strike, which began on Tuesday. These actions are part of the pressures against the government for the retirement system reform project, which includes the extension of the legal retirement age from 62 to 64 years, the increase of the contribution period, and the elimination of the special pension systems. Demonstrators call on deputies and senators to reject this bill on the third day of debates in Parliament. And the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov pledged military support to Mali during his first visit to the West African nation. Russia's top diplomat met with Mali's military junta leader, Colonel Assimi Goïta, at the Kolouba presidential palace on Tuesday. Lavrov told journalists that Russia has delivered very large supplies of aviation equipment to Mali over the past few months, which has significantly increased the capability of local forces to fight extremists and dismiss criticism of Moscow's growing influence on the continent. The Russian diplomat's trip to Bamako, Mali's capital, comes as Western countries express their concerns about alleged human rights abuses committed by Russian private military Wagner Group in Mali. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa delivers the annual State of the Union on Thursday as 60 million people without electricity for months hope the head of the state addresses the energy crisis in his speech. The ceremony, which is usually conducted with great pomp and circumstance at Parliament, will be held this time at the Town Hall building in an economic and social context which calls for sobriety. South Africa is plagued by one of the highest unemployment rates on the planet, a GDP growth forecast for the year of almost zero, and families crushed by the constant rise in the price of basic commodities and angered at power shortages. At the call of the opposition and the trade unions, demonstrations have broken out in the past weeks in several cities, including Johannesburg. And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back. The death toll from the powerful earthquake that rocked Turkey and Syria surpassed 17,000 on Wednesday, as rescuers raced to find survivors trapped on arrival in freezing weather. Authorities said 14,014 people have died in Turkey and 3,162 in Syria after the 7.8 magnitude earthquake, bringing the number of confirmed fatalities to 17,176. Images are going around the world showing the efforts of the rescue corps and the joy of finding survivors. Monday's earthquake is considered the greatest tragedy to have occurred in these two countries in the 21st century. International solidarity is being felt with the arrival of supplies to aid the victims. Although in the case of Syria, there are irregularities with the delivery of resources due to the sanctions of the United States and the European Union. We stay in the matter. A Venezuelan shipment of humanitarian aid arrived in Syria after the earthquake that devastated the Arab nation last Monday. 24 fighters and 5 experts from the Venezuelan Foundation for Seismological Research, FUNVISIS, arrived in the country to assist the rescue operations. This is the first shipment of humanitarian assistance from Latin America to Syria. Damascus denounced the attitude of Western nations in obstructing rescue actions and attention to the Syrian victims of the earthquake of magnitude 7.8.
We are here, first of all, to send a message to the Syrian people that we are with them. Here comes a team of more than 20 professional experts in search and rescue operations. They also bring specialized equipment as well as more than 10 tons of medicine and food to ease the hardships that the Syrian people are going through.
And Damascus denounces that the blockade and sanctions imposed by the United States and the European Union prevent medicines and humanitarian aid from reaching Syria, worsening the situation of the Syrian people who are struggling with all the means at their disposal to overcome the current emergency. Our correspondent in Syria, Hisham Wanos, with all the details.
The terrorist war imposed on Syria has led to the destruction of the infrastructure and the loss of more than 50,000 vehicles, which Syria now needs to cope with the disaster caused by the earthquake. This is what the Syrian Minister of Local Administration has said, claiming that Western sanctions are preventing the country from compensating for the lack of vehicle that would have made it possible to deal with the aftermath of the earthquake.
The priority now is to remove the debris to save lives, and we have managed to save a large number of citizens trapped under the rubble thanks to the efforts of all parties involved and the rapid response with the available capacities of both government institutions and civil society.
In defiance of these sanctions, which they describe as inhumane, many Arab and foreign countries send civil protection teams and aid planes to Syria to help alleviate the suffering of the Syrian people. At the same time, there was an outpouring of social solidarity with the victims, with national campaigns to give blood for the wounded and collect donations for families who had lost their homes.
We help each other without expecting others to help us, and I really wish now that in addition to donating blood, I would be with my fellow Syrians in the affected areas to help rescue those trapped under the rubble. As much as we are offering help, we feel it is not enough.
In the midst of these difficult circumstances that we are going through, we demand the lifting of sanctions in order to facilitate the arrival of aid to our country to alleviate the suffering of our people as a result of the earthquake that has made our suffering even more acute.
We're suffering from an unjust blockade, and in these difficult conditions, we have no choice but choosing social solidarity and try to offer as much help as we can, whether it is material help, financial help, or blood donations for the wounded, and everyone can offer what they can to help all the brothers in the disaster areas.
Meanwhile, national rescue teams are working against the clock to save the lives of those trapped under the debris, a huge task they are undertaking tirelessly, with the help of volunteers, Syria's and Russia's troops, and rescuers from many countries around the world. The number of collapsed buildings now stands at 102 in the coastal province of Latakia and 54 in Aleppo. Entire neighborhoods have been evacuated for fear of collapse, as aftershocks from the region's strongest earthquake in decades continue.
Hisham Wannous, TeleSUR, Damascus, Syria.
Thank you, Hisham. Let's go to other topics. Contrary to early reports, former Newcastle United winger and Ghana international Christian Atsu is yet to be rescued from the rubble of the earthquake that devastated Turkey and Syria on Monday. Despite initially reassuring information, relatives of the Ghanaian footballer told the press on Wednesday that they still had no news of the player. The Ghanaian embassy in Ankara and the Ghana Football Federation had assured on Tuesday that Atsu had been found alive in the rubble of a collapsed building. The 31-year-old joined the Turkish club Hatay Sport in September, based in the province of Hatay, near the epicenter of the earthquake. According to the latest official reports released on Wednesday, over 11,000 people have been reported dead and thousands injured in Turkey and Syria as a result of Monday's quake. New groups of specialists from Mexico and Colombia arrived in Chile today to help contain the forest fires in the center-south of the country. The fires have already devastated more than 290,000 hectares. The Mexican contingent from the National Forestry Commission, experienced in dealing with similar emergencies in Central America and Canada, will be sent to the Araucania region. The group brings to 300 the number of experts sent by the government of Andrés Manuel López Obrador to Chile to respond to the disaster, which has left 24 dead, around 2,000 injured, and over 1,500 homes destroyed. Also, in the last few hours, a cargo plane from Colombia arrived in Chile with 20 brigadists, 4 communications specialists, 2 paramedics, and a coordinator on board.
We will do our best to work with the Chilean brigades, who have been working for so many days, who are so exhausted, and who have been doing an excellent job since the beginning of the catastrophe.
Accompany the 150 brigade members who arrived from Mexico yesterday and today are already leaving to work in the area of Santa Juana, which is one of the areas most in need of support. It is a mission of 300 brigade members who go to the field, primarily to places where sometimes planes, helicopters, and even vehicles cannot reach. So that is the intention of the Mexican contingent.
And like this, we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.